Invented Ethereum when he was just a kid. And that's not even the coolest thing that Vitalik Buterin did.
Vitalik Buterin has been called the world's youngest crypto billionaire. He's the founder of the second largest cryptocurrency, Ethereum, which has powered applications of decentralized finance, NFTs, decentralized organizations, prediction markets, games, and much more. In an industry filled with greed and hype, Vitalik demonstrates thoughtfulness, patience, and a humble spirit that has led to his rise as a different kind of leader, a philosopher leader, and a bit of a meme lord thrown in there too.
Vitalik, clapping, Vitalik, impressed.
Mistake is hard, but what I do know is when we learn a shard, we'll change the whole game, though.
E2.0, yo! E2.0, yo! E2.0, yo! E2.0, yo!
He's held true to his values of decentralization and over the years has shifted his focus toward public goods and designing fairer social systems. And he's been quite critical of the exuberance and wealth disparities consuming the crypto space. Vitalik believes a thriving decentralized ecosystem will have both good crazy and bad crazy, and he's using his soft power to encourage as much of the former as possible. This is the story of Vitalik Buterin and how crypto's voice of conscience came to be.
What's your dream? Yeah.
I have many dreams, and
Yeah?
I hope that with blockchains we can create a world that is more open and fair, a world where if anyone can participate. It's a very interesting time in human civilization right now.
Vitalik was born in Russia in 1994 to two computer scientists, Dmitriy and Natalia, a few years after the fall of the Soviet Union. As a kid, Vitalik's mind was going so fast that his father says he learned how to read before he could sleep through the night, and he was slow to form sentences compared with his peers. It was clear that Vitalik was gifted from a young age. At 4, he began to play with Excel on his parents' IBM computer. At 7, he could recite more than 100 digits of pi and shouted out math equations to pass time. At 12, he was coding. The family moved to Canada when Vitalik was 6, and he describes his upbringing there as lonely and disconnected. Perhaps this was the reason that he further retreated toward computers, video games like World of Warcraft, and he developed a knack for communication through writing. It was his dad that introduced him to Bitcoin in 2011. Dmitry was attracted to the decentralized currency that was not controlled by governments after seeing the collapse of both the Russian and US financial systems.
The thing that always attracted me about Bitcoin is, these values of, decentralization, creating these open permissionless systems that anyone can participate in and that aren't just going to flop over and die if whoever created them gets bored, and that are resistant to whoever runs them breaking the rules and all of these things, right?
Learning about Bitcoin combined many of Vitalik's interests in math, in programming, and in economics. So Vitalik began writing about Bitcoin, and he soon co-founded Bitcoin Magazine and became its lead writer. Despite being in university, he would carve out 30 hours a week focusing on his 3 passions: research, writing, and Bitcoin. And this helped not only clarify his thinking, but also to establish a following in the space.
I did a lot of Bitcoin-related things for about 2 years, eventually dropped out of university to join the space full-time. And soon after that, I started to realize that there were a lot more interesting things that you could do with blockchains than just a single peer-to-peer currency. And this was something a lot of other people were starting to recognize at the same time. And I came up with the idea behind Ethereum, this idea of a blockchain with a built-in programming language.
Vitalik uses this analogy to compare Bitcoin and Ethereum.
Think of the difference between something like a pocket calculator and a smartphone, where a pocket calculator does one thing and it does one thing well, but really people want to do all of these other things. And if you have a smartphone, then on the smartphone you have a Pocket Calculator as an app, you have playing music as an app, you have a web browser as an app, and pretty much everything else. So basically taking that same kind of idea of increasing the power of the system by making it more general purpose and applying it to blockchains.
In 2013, Vitalik released a vision for Ethereum in a 36-page white paper. He envisioned a blockchain that could secure assets ranging from web apps to financial derivatives. The name Ether comes from a concept scientists had previously believed was a subtle and transparent material that permeated all matter and space. Vitalik hoped that his platform could be an underlying medium across applications. To work on Ethereum, Vitalik chose 7 other co-founders who joined him in a 3-story Airbnb in Switzerland, where they focused on writing code and wooing investors. Or at least, that was the intention. He would soon regret his decision.
The harder things are social problems. So, there's many people that left. There's many people that were fighting each other, and I had to remove one or both of them. There's many people that were just causing different kinds of problems, and people with kind of different interests and different desires, and making everyone happy was much more difficult than I expected.
Vitalik experienced a culture shock going from an independent coder to a decision maker now managing a bunch of egos. While some of the founders enjoyed mixing work and play, not wanting to miss out on episodes of Game of Thrones over beer, Vitalik mostly kept to himself and worked. The biggest rift, however, was about how Ethereum would be set up. For Vitalik, it was crucial that Ethereum was decentralized and that no one should hold unilateral power over its future. Some of his co-founders, however, had different ideas, including setting up a for-profit company and potentially using company data to sell targeted ads to users. One co-founder even tried to appoint himself as CEO. In the beginning, there were times that Vitalik negotiated down the percentages of Ether distribution that all the co-founders would get in order to be more egalitarian. They were not happy with this. Despite the stress and feuding, though, Vitalik moved onward.
Here is where Ethereum comes in. Instead of specializing for each individual application, you come up with a programming language. And then that programming language is so powerful that you can build any application on top that can conceivably be built. This is the reason why computers are so powerful today. After we came out with JavaScript around 2000, the internet just blew up. The inventors of JavaScript never intended for somebody to write Gmail on top of JavaScript, or for somebody to write Facebook on top of JavaScript, or for somebody to write Bitcoin wallets on top of JavaScript. But JavaScript, this programming language of the internet browser, was a foundation for innovation. And that's what I hope to bring to the world of cryptocurrency.
Eventually, Ethereum launched, the team split up, and Vitalik went on to form the Ethereum Foundation, a non-profit organization. The foundation's website specifically calls out that they do not control Ethereum, nor are they the only organization that funds development of Ethereum-related technologies. Looking back, Vitalik later tweeted that his hardest lesson was that people are harder to tightly coordinate in small groups than I expected. You can't just get everyone to sit around in a circle, see each other's inherent goodness and get along, especially when huge incentive conflicts are at play. Vitalik's approach to leadership is very different from traditional tech CEO leadership practices. His colleagues have noted this, saying, "In the dichotomy between centralization and anarchy, Ethereum seems to be going toward anarchy. He's not good at bossing people around. From a social navigation perspective, he was immature. He's probably still conflict averse. As an introvert, Vitalik is notoriously hard to track down at events. While many tech leaders have spiffed up their public images over the years, Vitalik couldn't care less. On Twitter, Vitalik has publicly joked about his favorite insults that people have flung at him regarding his appearance. People have compared him to a school shooter, a Bond villain, and an alien crackhead. Vitalik doesn't call himself a leader. Rather, he describes himself as a developer, a researcher, and a blogger, persuading through the power of his keystrokes. His blog posts are often intellectual explorations, where he displays his thinking with transparency and rigor, including pointing out his previous flaws in thinking for the public to see. This practice is quite rare for a leader. Over the years, Vitalik has turned his attention toward larger social-political issues that he hopes Ethereum can help solve. And he's turned toward his blog and Twitter to share these ideas, spanning topics like housing, city building and urban planning, fairer voting systems, universal basic income, and ways to distribute public goods.
I've been recently participating in this kind of radical exchange movement, looking at things like hamburger taxes, quadratic voting, quadratic funding, like these different kind of economic mechanisms. There's like a lot of these interesting ideas that use kind of very new insights from economics that haven't really been tried yet at scale. And I think it would be interesting if they could be.
In many ways, Vitalik is more a philosopher and thought leader than a charismatic CEO. Despite his desire to play behind the scenes, Vitalik's influence over Ethereum has been undeniable. In 2016, his leadership and values were put to the test during the DAO incident. The DAO was a venture organization and one of the most hyped crypto projects at the time. More than 14% of all Ether had been invested in it. But within 3 months of launch, it was hacked, and $60 million worth of Ether were stolen. This was a significant public relations fire. Vitalik had a difficult decision ahead. If he did nothing, the community would have to eat the loss, which could bring about fears of large hacks in the future. So Vitalik consulted with the community and wrote blog posts advocating for a controversial practice called a hard fork. If the community agreed to this, it would create a new branch of Ethereum that eliminated transactions as if the hack had never happened. He watched as the community voted overwhelmingly in favor of a fork. And when the fork happened, users still had the option to stick with the original version, called Ethereum Classic. But the overwhelming majority chose the new version. While Vitalik saw this as an exercise of soft power, others disagreed.
I think Vitalik made some mistakes with Ethereum. To me, that was not the most prudent approach, because you're basically violating the core protocol rules in order to bail out a specific contract which has failed. That was one reason why I became disenchanted with Ethereum. It basically demonstrates that there's certain elites at the protocol level that can exercise specific control over the system. And, you know, a lot of people have lost money in hacks on Ethereum, and a lot of contracts have gone south, huge amount of value. But they didn't get a bailout.
In 2017, a false story on the message board 4chan claimed that Vitalik had died in a fatal car crash. Within hours, Ethereum's market value dropped by $4 billion, about 13% of its market value at the time. Vitalik had to post a selfie on Twitter to dispel the rumor, and although Ethereum recovered, the incident further demonstrated that for many, Vitalik and Ethereum are closely intertwined. As Ethereum has grown more successful over the past few years, so has the number of things that Vitalik is concerned about.
This kind of hype exceeding reality is something that's just inevitable as a matter of kind of both human mass psychology and just kind of micro incentives in terms of, wanting to talk about the things that people get excited about, because that's how you have good conversations and things like that multiplied by millions of people. So it's difficult to avoid, having ups, and then when people realize that their ups haven't been satisfied, it's difficult to avoid the downs.
2021 marked the rise of NFTs. As NFTs have gone mainstream and prices have skyrocketed, he's scornful of the shameless displays of wealth, calling the $3 million apes another form of gambling. Vitalik is also wary of celebrities misusing their influence in the space.
The thing that I was unhappy with about Kim Kardashian was that she basically shilled something like Ethereum Max that was I'd call it a borderline scam, right? It seems like this project that's basically just like at best a pure money grab that's not really providing much of value.
Vitalik has been vocal against the venture capitalist industry, with money flowing into the space, giving these already wealthy venture capitalists dominant voting power in crypto orgs. He calls it a new version of plutocracy. One of the biggest issues about Ethereum are the high transaction fees. As the blockchain has grown in popularity, its network has become quite congested, making it expensive to use. Vitalik believes this is the reason that we're not seeing more cool stuff getting built, such as before 2017 when there was a decentralized Uber project in Switzerland. Projects like that assumed transaction fees of a few cents on the dollar, compared to the double digits we see today. When fees are high, most use cases are confined to financial trading and NFT gambling by crypto whales, a term that refers to people with deep crypto pockets. This is why the Ethereum Foundation is working hard on technical developments that will reduce transaction costs.
But the thing that makes me very happy about the space now that it has happened is that I'm interested in this concept of decentralized public goods funding, right? Like, I want things that are good and valuable to, as much as possible, also be things that can, economically sustain the people who produce them, right? Yeah. Because if you don't have that, then either the public goods just don't get produced at all, or people make like centralized versions that have some of the properties and try to be substitutes, but actually just like concentrate control in a very small group. Both of those things are not very nice. So the nice thing about NFTs would be, well, if you're an artist and you can just mint NFTs and this is a source of revenue, then like, great, that's another stream of revenue for, creative work that often does still get underfunded, and that's amazing.
These views have led some to describe Vitalik as the conscience of crypto.
In some ways, I feel like even my first 5 years of doing Ethereum things, my life was not even all that self-directed, because a lot of it was just, responding to obligation. And the last year of COVID life holed up in Singapore for much of it, right? And it gave me a lot more alone time. I had much less travel, and that was definitely a very new and interesting experience for me. I definitely did take this, make this very deliberate decision that okay, I have this time and I'm going to actually make something meaningful out of it.
One noticeable shift in Vitalik is his increasing role under the public limelight. When Canada froze the bank accounts of anyone involved in supporting or donating to protests, Vitalik spoke up.
If the government is not willing to follow the processes, follow the laws, give people a chance to defend themselves and all of those things, and they just want to talk to the banks and basically cut out people's financial livelihoods without due process, honestly, yeah, that is an example of that decentralized technology is there to make more difficult.
When Russia invaded Ukraine, he said, "This is a crime against the Ukrainian and Russian people," and that while Ethereum was neutral, he was not. In March 2022, he was featured on the front page of Time, warning against the greed and scams driving crypto culture. He told the publication, "One of the decisions I made in 2022 is to try to be more risk-taking and less neutral." Vitalik worries that crypto can have very dystopian potential. Governments and corporations could shut down financial access to groups of people, as we've already started to see happening. Crypto can give a lot of visibility into people's transactions, and this makes it easier for anyone with an agenda, be it government, internet mobs, or journalists, to practice surveillance into people's private lives. Through all of this, Vitalik demonstrates the ethos of a Web3 leader. When faced with crucial decisions, he's chosen decentralization over control, choice over tyranny, and patience over greed. Things may not always go in the way he prefers, but these incidents have only catapulted Ethereum to center stage and pushed Vitalik to grapple with his own role as a leader.